A floor plan with a strange layout. Something that, at first glance, makes you go, this feels a little off. And then the longer you look at it, the more the weirdness stands out. An apparent closet with no way in or out. A bedroom surrounded on all sides by halls and other rooms and no windows. Bathrooms in odd places and rooms that are just too small for their normal function. What's going on here? Why was this house built in such a weird manner? And that's what Henna Ie, or Strange Houses by Uketsu explores. This week, let's dig into the story and uncover what's actually happening in this fantastic little mystery that takes us to several houses to uncover the dark, horrific secrets held by one single family. Needless to say, this video will be full of spoilers, and I'll be working strictly from the novel. Not the movie, not the manga, not the later reworkings you can find on the internet. Just the novel. So, the story begins quite simply, with our narrator getting a request from a friend to look at the layout of a house he's considering buying. However, this friend has noticed something weird in the layout, and so he wants his friend to investigate it for him, seeing as he's a horror writer and all. The layout shows what appears to be a closet with no way in or out, but the longer they look at it, the more weird things they notice. Like, the child's bedroom on the second floor is surrounded on all sides. You have to travel through the regular bedroom and then a smaller hallway to get there. It also has no windows, which is very weird for a child's room. However, if you lay the map of the second floor over the first floor, it appears that at least part of this inaccessible closet overlaps with the child's room. Is it possible that you can enter this space on the first floor from the child's room on the second? And if so, what possible purpose could it serve? I'm not going to get into all of the intricacies of the exact layout and the numerous ideas they come up with, but the narrator visits Kurihara, an architect who likes mysteries, and together they try to figure this out. Their initial thoughts are that a family of murderers once lived here, and the inaccessible space was used by the child to transport pieces of body out so nobody would know what was really going on in there. The narrator writes a small piece on the weird house, even after his friend decides that, nah, it's too creepy to buy now, and this leads to a woman by the name of Yuzuki contacting him. She claims she might have information about this weird house he wrote about, and that her husband, who was oddly found missing his left hand, was likely connected to it. And to cut a long story short, it turns out that Yuzuki isn't exactly who she says she is. She's actually the sister of the woman who lived in that strange house previously, and she's actually trying to find her. She just wasn't sure whether the narrator could really help or if she could fully trust him just yet. Either way, they look at another strange layout, this time from her sister's previous house, and again, it's looking likely that these houses were used for murder. There are all these weird enclosed spaces and gaps in the walls, and ways to move around without being seen. But why? What's actually going on in these houses? What type of life has her sister been leading, and where is she now? The answer to all of this lies in the Katabuchi family's past. And as the story takes us to the third and final house of the book, the main Katabuchi household, we're informed of the family's history through conversation with Yuzuki's mother, Yoshie, and letters that Yuzuki's sister's husband, Keita, left behind before disappearing. This is the part of the story where it can be a little difficult to keep up due to the massive number of family members thrown at you all at once, so let's break it down piece by piece. It all begins with Katabuchi Kae, a man who lived around the end of the Meiji era and the start of the Taisho era. He was married and had 3 children. With his wife, he had Soichiro and Chizuru, and with a mistress, he had Seikichi. Now, Kae was a capable and intelligent businessman, but sadly, Soichiro, his firstborn son, was nothing like him. He was shy and awkward, and not really good at anything. His illegitimate son, Seikichi, however, was a chip off the old block. When it came time to think about who would take over the family business, well, it was obvious who would be best: Seikichi. However, the times being what they were, Seikichi was still an illegitimate son. Kaie named the rather useless Soichiro as his successor. And because he was so awkward, even by the age of 24, Soichiro still hadn't known the touch of a woman, and Kaie was worried about whether his son could get married and start his own family to continue the Katabuchi legacy. And being that he was kinda weird, no one really wanted to marry him either. So, Kaie picked a woman who had been working for the family as a maid since she was a child, Ushio. She was already familiar with Soichiro. They were close in age. And with this marriage, she could move up in the world, something she was happy to do. A perfect union, obviously. They got married and, at first, things seemed okay. But then, Ushio quickly realized something. Soichiro still wouldn't touch her. Wouldn't treat her like she was his wife. And not surprisingly, the Katabuchi business wasn't going so great under his leadership either. One night, Ushio watched her husband leaving their bedroom, and so she followed him to see where he was going. Unfortunately for her, it was to Chizuru's room. He was spending his nights with his sister. And things got even worse when it soon came to light that Chizuru was pregnant. The Katabuchi family's reputation would be destroyed if people learnt that the head of the household had gotten his own sister pregnant. Seikichi soon caught wind of this himself, and visited Soichiro to threaten him. He wanted him to hand the family business over to him. With that in hand, he started breaking everything down and transferring it to his own family, essentially destroying the main Katabuchi household while propping up his branch family as the real power. With happiness finally dangled on a stick right in front of her, Ushio was devastated to see it just as suddenly ripped away. Her husband had gotten his own sister pregnant. This folly led to his business being handed over to his younger half-brother, who then took everything from them. All they were left with was the house they lived in and some minor essentials to get by. Having to live with her husband and his now pregnant sister, just the three of them, in these conditions, drove her mad. One day, Ushio told her husband she wanted to eat some persimmons. He brought some to her room with a knife, cut them into pieces, and then left, leaving the knife with the fruit. A short while later, a bad feeling washed over him, so he rushed back to find Ushio lying in the middle of the room, blood everywhere, and her left hand barely hanging on by a thread. She was dead. A few months later, Chizuru gave birth to twin boys, but to their parents' shock and horror, the younger twin was missing his left hand. After visiting a monk for advice, they decided to use characters that held protective meanings in their names. They named the boys Asata and Momota. When the boys were 3, a shaman by the name of Dankyo visited Soichiro and claimed that Ushio's vengeful spirit was still haunting them, and she was the reason Momota was born without a left hand. If they wished to break her curse, they'd have to undertake the Hidarite Kuyo, or the left hand memorial service. The steps were simple, although cruel. 1. Momota would need to be confined to a room with no sunlight. 2. Soichiro had to build a separate building on the family's land, and there dedicate a Buddhist altar to Ushio. 3. When Momota turned 10, he would have to kill one of Seikichi's children. 4. After that, he should remove their left hand and dedicate it to Ushio at her altar. 5. Asata would act as his brother's guardian to ensure all this happened. 6. Finally, this would repeat each year until Momota turned 13. Pretty straightforward, right? During this time, Seikichi was apparently rather polygamous and had 5 wives, and thus numerous children. He was also making big bucks from his business ventures that he basically extorted from Soichiro. So, yeah, Soichiro wasn't exactly opposed to the idea of one of his children killing a few of Seikichi's. He also feared his dead wife's wrath, so he agreed to Dankyo's demands. But there was an extra layer of deception taking place here. Dankyo wasn't really a shaman. In fact, she was the sister of Seikichi's second wife, Shizuko. Dankyo's real name was Miyako, and this was a scheme they came up with to get rid of Seikichi's other children so that Shizuko's son would be named his successor. Yes, another succession dispute. And before long, 3 of Seikichi's children were killed. His firstborn son, and then his third and fourth-born sons. And just as they hoped, Seikichi's second son was then named his successor. The plan was a big success. And when the Pacific War broke out, Seikichi's remaining kids kind of just dispersed all over the country. However, until his dying day, Soichiro believed in Ushio's curse, not knowing that it was something Miyako, under the name of Dankyo, made up. So, he basically made it a family law that should be carried out should a child ever be born into the family missing a left hand. Soichiro and Chizuru went on to have one more child before they died, Shigeharu, who by this point in the story we know as Yuzuki's grandfather. So, this left-hand memorial service was passed down to him as well, and being that both of his brothers ended up dying young anyway, Shigeharu then inherited what little Soichiro had left, including, apparently, Ushio's curse and how to deal with it. Now, for over 80 years, this wasn't a problem. No further children were born missing a left hand. Until 2006, that is. Shigeharu had 2 sons, Kimihiko and a man who would become Yuzuki's father. For some reason, he's never named. Kimihiko got married to a woman by the name of Misaki, and during an ultrasound during her 4th month of pregnancy with her second child, they discovered her unborn child was missing his left hand. Misaki called Yoshie, who was now married to Yuzuki's father, to discuss what to do. Knowing what was now waiting for both her children, she was obviously debating an incredibly serious and dark choice. But the very next day, Shigeharu locked her up in the house and kept her there until it was too late for her to do anything, essentially forcing her to give birth. And so she did, to a boy named Momoya. Again, the protective word Momo was added to his name like his great-uncle, Momota. Sadly, his father Kimihiko passed away shortly before he was born due to a bad heart. And realizing that his father was dead serious about the left-hand memorial service being carried out, Yuzuki's father understood that his own children, Ayano and Yuzuki, would be targets. Why? Because their mother Yoshie was actually the grandchild of Seikichi's 7th child. They carried the blood not just of the main Katabuchi household, but also the branch family too. They were now potential targets for this ritual once Momoya turned 10. And so their father made a drastic choice. He killed Yoichi, Momoya's older brother, and tried to frame it as an accident. By doing this, he hoped that Ayano would be chosen as Momoya's guardian instead, thereby saving both his children. However, killing his own nephew still drove him mad with grief and guilt, and he ended up taking his own life. It worked though. Ayano was chosen as Momoya's guardian when the time arose, and she married Keita, a classmate, who assisted her. Of course, they didn't want Momoya to actually kill anyone, so they devised a plan to move away from the Katabuchi household and live by themselves. Shigeharu allowed it as long as the ritual was still carried out. Hence the strange layouts of their houses. Momoya still had to be confined. They still, technically, had to find members from Seikichi's bloodline for him to kill and cut off their left hands. These would then be given to Kiyotsugu, the nephew of Fumino, Shigeharu's wife, who would then take them back to the Katabuchi household and dedicate them to Ushio's altar there. But Ayano and Keita tried to game the ritual by finding people who were already dead and cutting their hands off. They lied to Kiyotsugu about the particular family member Momoya had killed, and the ruse apparently worked. At least until Kiyotsugu looked into it and realized that family member was still alive. They'd been living happily as a family all this time, alongside Ayano and Keita's own son, Hiroto, and now Shigeharu was trying to tear them all apart again. He wanted Momoya returned to the main house so the ritual could be carried out proper. In the end, it's revealed that Keita killed both Kiyotsugu and Shigeharu in a struggle, and so Momoya is saved. With them gone, nobody is left to force him to undergo the ritual, and we're told that Keita is still on the run by the time the book's events wrap up. There are, however, quite a few lingering questions that are never fully answered, and when you dive into those, several aspects of the story are, in reality, turned on their head. For one, quite early in the book, we're informed of a body that has been found dismembered in Tokyo. It's also missing its left hand. This interesting little tidbit never seems to go anywhere, almost like it's a loose end. But perhaps it's not. The book even gives us a very roundabout hint as to who that dismembered body may be. Keita. Towards the end, Kurihara mentions that the letters the narrator reads may not have actually been written by Keita. Indeed, why would Keita know so much about the family and their history, even if he married into it? What if they were written by someone else? Yuzuki or Ayano, or maybe even Yoshie, and exist merely to convince Kurihara and the narrator that Keita is actually alive, and that Keita is to blame for the deaths of Kiyotsugu and Shigeharu. A convenient scapegoat, if you will, who is now on the run and conveniently can't be found. Conversely, was the dismembered body actually Momoya's? Towards the end of the novel, Yuzuki mentions that Yoshie, her mother, is now enjoying time with her 2 grandsons. At a glance, you might think this includes Momoya, but he's not actually her grandson. She's also never shown to hold any particularly affectionate feelings for the boy. In fact, he kind of ruined her daughters' lives. Why would she happily be caring for this boy she's not even that closely related to? Was the body, in fact, dismembered to conceal the fact that it never had a left hand to begin with? The book doesn't give us any details on the body other than it's male. Was Ayano pregnant around the time all of this was taking place, and then she gave birth shortly thereafter? This would certainly be a good reason to have Yoshie around as well, as a newborn and a young child are definitely going to need an adult around to look after them while Ayano is at work. Speaking of Yoshie, who exactly is she, and what is it that she really wants? It's massively hinted that she's the true mastermind behind everything that takes place in the book, and she knows far more than she lets on. Whenever something vital happens, Yoshie always seems to be at the scene of the crime. Misaki calls her to inform her of her unborn child missing his left hand, and the next day, she's confined to the house. The novel also tells us that Seikichi's descendants spread out all over Japan, yet Yoshie has all their information. Someone has been feeding the Katabuchi family this information for the ritual, and it's most likely her. And funnily enough, at the end of the day, the only people who die are all members of the main Katabuchi family. All of Seikichi's descendants survive. Did Yoshie achieve revenge for the senseless killings that took place long ago? It certainly seems like she has some grudge to bear, and has been hard at work behind the scenes for quite some time now. And finally, and for me perhaps the most intriguing question of all, does Ayano even actually exist? Or perhaps, does Yuzuki actually exist? This is an interesting theory I saw while looking at various Japanese websites, and I think it's a fascinating question. With how the novel is set up, we never see Ayano. She's only spoken about. It's also evident throughout that perhaps not everyone is exactly who they say they are. Yuzuki literally lied about who she was right at the start. And perhaps not all of the information we are given is 100% accurate. So then, was Yuzuki actually Ayano all this time? Is this entire mystery, and all of the information presented to the narrator and Kurihara, simply a ruse to cover their tracks for the roles they played in the potential deaths of Momoya and or Keita, and Shigeharu and Kiyotsugu? Again, this is something that's never outright stated, but there are certainly enough hints and nothing that contradicts that Yuzuki might actually be her sister. This theory is also heavily supported by the later Kanzenban, or perfect version, that Uketsu himself released. Now, these aren't all of the mysteries that are still left unanswered by the novel, but a few of the bigger ones that I personally found interesting. But what did you guys think of Strange Houses? Are there any unanswered questions you'd still like to know the answers to? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you again next time.